Hello, everyone. This is part two of a three-part series that I am currently writing. I will be linking part one of this series down in the description just in case you haven't watched it yet. And if you haven't done so, I recommend you do because this story immediately takes off right where that story ended. So, yeah, sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy this story. An hour just passed. 2 hours. Three. Cell service is basically non existent right now. I honestly forgot how remote this place really is. I dreamt of my memories. Dad and Grandpa were teaching us how to sharpen knives today. My older brother didn't believe this would be any helpful since it wasn't like we needed them to fillet a fish or anything. But Dad then proceeded to slash a nearby tree and then carved our initials into it. Good and well maintained equipment will save you time and energy. If you have more time and energy, you can do a lot more things that need to be done. Here in the forest, if you can make things a little easier for yourself, then you shouldn't hesitate to do so. Those words echoed in my mind. I'm not sure how much time had already passed. I realized I had dozed off. Shit. I got up and looked around for my supplies and gear. Thankfully, they were still there. I had begun to think that all of this wasn't true. Maybe it was an elaborate prank by the family. Or my father was just suffering from some sort of dementia or something. But that was when I noticed. The only thing I could hear was myself. The forest was eerily quiet. In the deep woods, when the mist rolls in and the wind stops blowing, don't speak his name. Don't look into the dark for too long, and whatever you do, never follow the knocking. A mist had just rolled in as I was thinking back to that old story, and I proceeded to fix my gaze on the cabin floor. It wasn't long after when I heard it. Whispers of a name. I knew what that thing, what he was called now. I almost found myself going along with the chant when I heard a knock on the door. This was it. I froze. My instincts were screaming at me to stay inside. It was the feeling of a kid who hid under the sheets because the boogeyman was under his bed. The thoughts were racing in my mind, but then there was another knock. Further this time. That thing. If I don't play along with its game and let it have its fun with me, then I know the next person it will hunt down. Mom. By now, the knocking was already faint, probably a few yards away. The eerie silence of the forest made it easier to figure out which direction the sound was coming from. All I could hear was the sound of my breath, my footsteps, and that knocking. I proceeded to follow it with caution. There was a certain rhythm to the knock as time went on. It was more frequent. It was building up. When I looked back, the cabin couldn't be seen anymore. In fact, I couldn't really see anything. It was pitch black and the clouds had just covered up the moon. I turned on my flashlight and checked my shotgun to make sure it was loaded up and ready. I continued to slowly pace towards the knocking. But by then, it had already stopped. I gave it a few more minutes to be sure, but there was no mistaking it. The hunt has started. My flashlight couldn't really penetrate the darkness beyond a few feet ahead of me. But this was better than not being able to see if this thing was right next to you or not. About 30 minutes had already passed. The mist cleared up a bit, but that was when I saw it. A scraggly figure crouching down, feeding on the corpse of some animal. The smell of it was putrid. It was as if I was locked in a room full of rotten eggs. I wanted to vomit then, but I did my best to hold it in. And then I shot at it. The shot grazed its shoulder. It flinched, but not much. One thing was for sure though. It's now paying attention to me. It started to stand up. The thing was probably about 9 feet tall. Its proportions were unnatural. I could see bone and what looked like rotting flesh barely hanging onto it. The smell of it just kept getting worse. It slowly turned into my direction, and then I could see it. Its face was a mass of darkness. For some reason, the light didn't reflect off its face. I couldn't make out any features, just red eyes and horns of unnatural length. I was frantically reloading my shotgun at this point, but then it proceeded to howl the most unnatural sound I've ever heard. There wasn't enough time. I ran in whatever direction I could. I could hear that thing running and jumping between the trees. I was able to load my next shot, and as it was right behind me, I turned around and shot it directly in its stomach. It screamed in agony. I wasted no time in putting some more distance between us. It had only been a few moments when I heard it chasing me again. I took a few more shots at it, but I'm not sure of any hit. My heart was pumping so fast at this point. My legs were tired, but the adrenaline just kept me going. In my haste at reloading my shotgun, I dropped several shells, and before I knew it, I was down to my last one. I heard it coming from the side this time. I took a ready stance and met it with a determined gaze. Things went silent after some point, and that's when I realized I was only a few feet away from that thing. It was staring down at me while scraping its claws on the trees right next to it. It was as if it was a chef ready to carve livestock. I didn't know why I found it so hard to pull the trigger. I had a clear shot, but once again, I froze. And at the worst possible moment too. Shit. It was only for a few moments and then it lunged at me. Come on, come on, come on. It took all I had, but I had to snap myself out of the trance-like state I was in and shot the thing point blank. The force of the shot threw the thing backwards and there was a moment of relief. There's no way it didn't go down with that. I wanted to check, but I was still afraid. I didn't want to go anywhere near it, so I just reloaded and put in my gun at it. The scene stayed like that for a few minutes. I eventually put my gun down to catch my breath. Despite being all rotten flesh and bones, its blood, if that is what it was starting to ooze out. The ground it touched visibly began to die. So I rushed back to the cabin to grab a can of gasoline that I had brought with me. Dad died of whatever venom that thing was oozing out, so I brought the can to burn its body. I had marked the trees on my way back so I could return quickly. It took a few minutes, but when I arrived, my heart stopped. It was gone. Shit. I should have grabbed a few more bullets. How could I be so stupid? I had grabbed my sidearm and hunting knife I tucked away on my back, readying for it to lunge out of the darkness. But it never did. The first bits of daylight eventually began to show. and I was showered with a sense of relief. I dropped to the forest floor, and the toll on my body was finally setting in. I wouldn't have minded sleeping right there and then, but I failed. That thing, that thing survived, and it's coming back tonight. I looked up and noticed its blood on the trees. They were visible decay marks, and I followed them, but it was to no avail. The trail ended, and it didn't seem like it dropped back to the ground. The forest floor at the end of the trail was practically undisturbed. It was like it just vanished, as it was jumping from the trees. I looked around for a bit to try and see if I had just missed it, but there really was nothing. The forest was back to its old self again, just the way I had remembered it. I walked back to the edge of the forest to get some more supplies from my car. Luckily, there was a bit of cell service, and I received a text message from my brothers. They're coming up to the cabin. That thing. That thing will be back tonight. But we'll be prepared.